Hey everyone, we are going to continue on with our seminar series with a seminar that we give that provides some considerations that you need to think about for long-term RV travel. And this is number 3 in our seminar series, and we have a few more to go after this. And just as a reminder, these seminar series videos are abbreviated versions of the seminars we give at RV shows. At an RV show, this seminar, for example, would last about an hour, maybe a little over an hour. So just be aware of that and still come see us at the shows when they get back started. And so we're going to cover in this seminar, we're going to cover some of the major factors to prepare and launch your long-term RV dreams. We'll answer questions such as, what are some options to do with my home? How will I get my mail? What about healthcare? And how much does it really cost? But first, we would like to tell you a little bit about ourselves. We're both retired military, and we were not ready to settle down in one place when we stopped serving in the military. We both got corporate jobs and they both allowed us to work remotely. So we hit the road and we traveled at first in our 44-foot Heartland Cyclone. And then about 2 years ago, we downsized and we bought this 30-foot Arctic Fox, which has worked out perfect for us. And so along the way, we've documented some of the lessons we've learned and some of the journeys we've had, and we now share those at not only RV shows, but on our website, Chickery's Travels, and on this YouTube channel that you've obviously found. So let's jump into long-term RV travel.
And when we say long-term RV travel, we're not only talking about full-time RV travel, which it could be, like Sean and I, 6 years ago, moved into our RV and lived in it full time for those 6 years. But also just extended travel, like people who want to snowbird and go south for the winter, or people who want to take a whole summer off, or maybe just 1 year grand tour of the country. Any of those scenarios could fit. But depending on which of those scenarios applies to you is going to have more to do with your options of what about your house. So I'm just going to give you some ideas, some things that we've done, some things that we know other people have done, and then it'll be up to you to do the research to find out which works best for you. One of the first things, though, is that you could rent out your house. And that is actually what we did when we first started what was our full-time journey, because I wasn't convinced that I was going to want to full-time RVing forever. So I said, well, let's give it a year. Let's do a 1-year lease on our house, put our stuff in storage, and then we'll see how it goes. Ultimately, we ended up loving it so much that we actually later did option number 2, which is sell your house and most of your possessions. We even downsized our storage unit. So those are 2 options right there. But let me back up just a minute on renting your house. We chose to go the traditional route, which was we put all the things in storage and we rented out a vacant home on a traditional lease, a 1-year lease. And so this is the month-to-month rent type of scenario. But we do also know other people who are doing an Airbnb type of concept. And basically all that means, if you're not familiar with Airbnb, is that you rent it out to tenants. And this actually could work very well, even for people who are seasonal extended RV travelers. An example of this is we were traveling down in Key West, and in the winter, we met a couple who owns a home in Central Florida in a very popular retirement area called the Villages. And what they did was, for 4 months every winter, they would go down to Key West and they would rent out their home Airbnb style. So in other words, it was fully furnished and they just rented it out for those months they were away. The first month they had the first year, they had 3 different tenants over the course of those 4 months. So they were very short-term tenants. All the subsequent year, one of the tenants came back and rented it for the full 4 months. The thing about that is you can usually charge a higher rate than a normal empty rental that's on a year-to-year lease. And so they were actually made enough money not only to pay their mortgage, which was what our month to month annual type of lease did, but they were also able to pay for their campground down in the Keys. So those are some options of what you could do with your house. And again, like I said, the caveat to that also would be a storage factor, whether you're going to rent it, if you're going to rent it furnished or unfurnished. Would dictate how much storage you're going to have. Now, some other people who say, oh, I know I want a full-time forever, or I know for sure, even if it's not forever, I don't want to go back to that house. They might choose to sell all their belongings and not do storage at all. So if you are a very long-term traveler, so what I mean by this is you're not keeping your home that you're going back to like those people in the Keys, but you were more like us and we were moving away from that house. We were not going back to that house. We were either going to sell it or rent it out. You're going to need to establish a domicile if you don't want to keep it in the place where your home was. So we were living in Maryland before. It has very high taxes. Why would we want to keep our legal residency or domicile there when we had no plans on going back there, even if we didn't stay in the RV? So there are 3 different states that are very common for people to change to domicile in, and that is Florida, Texas, and South Dakota. And the reason why these 3 are so popular is they are considered RV friendly. And what that means is that they usually have better deals on registration. They don't usually include things like personal property tax that make it very expensive. In addition, a lot of times they're very simple to get a driver's license, and they don't have a state income tax. So if you're still working like we were, they don't tax that. There are a host of other states, if you're retired, that you could add to this list, because there are several other states, if you're retired, that don't tax retirement income. So if you're not happy with one of these 3, you could look for a different option. Now, I always recommend to people, if you're wanting to do one of these 3 states and you want to know a little bit more about how to legally establish a domicile, that you join a club called Escapees. So it's like the word escape, but at the end it has another ES. So Escapees. And it's $49.95 a year, I think, is the membership. There's a lot of great benefits, including community and people that you meet along the way, a lot of good online education, but they also have staff attorneys who have written blog posts that can help you establish a domicile. And you can even book time with attorneys if you want, if you have a lot of entanglements with the state. But I just want to add one little caveat. If you are keeping a home that you plan to go back to, you're going to have a problem if you try to establish a domicile somewhere else. If that previous state that you're leaving a home that you own and your doctor and your mail and all these other things in that state, and you just try to on paper go somewhere else to a place that doesn't have state income tax, that previous state can sue you. And some have actually won that lawsuit of back income tax. So just make sure that you do it right. And like I said, Escapees is a great place to get you started.
Now, one of the biggest questions we always get when we're doing the seminar at RV shows is about mail. And if you're just going like from your home and going to Snowbird down in Florida for 6 months or 5 months, you could just use the US Postal Service and have your mail forwarded to wherever you go. And then when you're going back up to your home, you just stop the forwarding and your mail returns back to your house. That's an easy way to do it if you're just going to one location. However, if you're going to be on the move, you may want to consider a mail forwarding service. And another good benefit of Escapees is they actually have a mail forwarding service, and you get an address in Texas. And depending on the level of service that you want, it costs between $95 and $135 a year for this mail forwarding service. And they will forward your mail to you wherever you are. The nice thing is most campgrounds now will allow you to receive some type of packages. And if not, there are local mail places where you can receive mail and go pick it up, usually for a small fee. And so that works as well. Also with things like Amazon shopping and other online shopping, again, a lot of campgrounds will allow you to receive Amazon packages, but now they have things like Amazon Locker, which are in a lot of towns that you can have something delivered to, or even some businesses now receive Amazon packages. And again, for a small fee, you can pick it up. Also, besides Escapees, there are other RV clubs that do mail forwarding. Good Sam is another one that does it. And then there are some private organizations that are also mail forwarding services that can cater to RVers. One of those is America's Mailbox in South Dakota. Now, we used a free option, and that was we used a family member who we forwarded all our mail to them, and then we trusted them. That's one thing. You got to make sure you trust this person to not steal your mail or not tell you about something. And then they would let us know if something important came. They would even take a picture of it if we asked them to and text it to us, so we had the information. So that's another option. And then make sure you move all of the bills and stuff that you can to an online option, and that will help as well. One important thing that we want you to consider right away before you embark on this long-term travel is your healthcare, and finding out what your current healthcare covers, if it will work when you're in other states. Some states or some insurance plans only allow for emergency care when you're outside of your coverage area, and that's an emergency defined by them, not by you. So you really want to do some research into this and make sure that your insurance is what they call portable, meaning you can take it other places, and that the coverage is not going to change, and you're not going to have to increase your deductible or anything like that when you're traveling outside of the coverage area for your insurance. Now, one thing about this is domiciles. And like Julie said, there's those 3 big states. Well, a lot of people pick Florida now because of the Affordable Care Act. They have kind of the best plans that are completely portable across the US that you can only purchase if you are a resident of Florida. So definitely do some research on that. A great place to look and talk to is a website called rverinsurance.com, and they're an independent insurance broker for all types of insurance, but health insurance for RVers is one thing they do, and they can quote you a policy for whatever your particular need is as far as healthcare insurance. And again, if you're still working, make sure you let your employer's HR know, and they can let you know if you'll be covered wherever you're going to be. Another thing is prescriptions, and we do a mail order. That works really good. And also, if we have something we can't get by mail order, we use a chain pharmacy like Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, one of those. And typically they can fill a prescription anywhere in the country. So you want to make sure and look into that before you run out of medication. Now, another extremely important part of taking extended travel or long-term RV travel is establishing your budget and make sure you can cover all the costs associated with it, including emergencies. And so we're going to talk about a few of the major categories: campgrounds, fuel, food, and maintenance. And we have a free budget worksheet that you can download from our website. And at the end, we're going to give you a link. We also have an article, and we show you what all of our expenses have been in the past on our full-time RV travels. Now, these expenses may not be applicable to you, but you can use it as a guide. We also have a course, Full-Time RV Finance, where we go into the weeds on all aspects of full-time RVing related to costs. So we'll provide a link to that in the description below, and you'll be able to check that out as well. So while your expenses may not be exactly the same as ours, we'll give you an idea of potential line items going forward and some things that you'll want to consider that maybe you haven't thought of yet.
So the first part, when you're talking about cost associated with extended RV travel, is defining your travel style. This has a huge impact on costs because just like hotels, you have your, like, what they call Motel 8 or whatever, the leave the light on people. That's like kind of the
Motel
low end,
6.
Motel 6, kind of the lower end of the price range. And then you have like these elaborate resorts. Campgrounds can be the same way. You can have your very basics, you can have dry camping, and then you can also have high-end resorts. Another thing about travel style is how far are you going to travel in your time period. So if you're going south to Florida for the winter and that's your only drive is to your destination and you're going to stay at one campground, that's going to have a lower cost than if you're trying to go from New York to California and back in that same time period. So the next part, going also into that concept of travel style, is choosing the right RV. And so there's two aspects: choosing the right RV for your budget. Budget always has to come first. How much can you afford to spend on the RV? And I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, to go back to the previous seminar video that we posted that talks about what RV is right for me and budgeting for RV travel, because in both of those, we get way more into the weeds on this concept. But you're going to want to establish a budget, and it's not only on a monthly payment of financing an RV, but there's a lot more involved in it. And then the right RV for your style, and that will include like your family size and how many people are going to be in the RV and what types of places are you traveling to. One thing we found with our first RV is it was not insulated worth a darn. And we were spending a lot of time in places that were either a little hot or a little cold. So our second fifth wheel that we love very much doesn't inhibit us now on where we can go because it is insulated so well. So those are just a couple of times of things to ask yourself when you're choosing the RV, the right RV for you. Now, campground costs can easily be one of your most expensive items on your extended travel budget, but it doesn't have to be. It all again goes back to that travel style. But I'll even give you a tip for how to stay if you want to be a glamper, which is what I call myself. But first, let's start with the free one, boondocking. Boondocking is also known as dry camping. A lot of extended and full-time RV travelers really enjoy doing this. It gets you off the grid and out in nature. Of course, the drawback is your RV kind of has to be outfitted for that a little bit. I mean, it will come fully self-contained, you know, so you do have a water holding tanks and wastewater tanks, and you have propane tanks, but those things have to be refilled or dumped and all that. So there are a little more logistics involved in it, but definitely it can save you a lot of money. And just a side note, some boondocking areas do require a permit fee. So like Quartzsite, Arizona is a very popular place in the winter for RV travelers. It's almost like a social event too. But if you stay in the long-term visitor area, there is a fee. It's not extremely expensive. I think it actually comes out to like $1 a day, but it is a fee nonetheless. And then you also have this kind of in between that and the higher end places, you have your public campgrounds. And so these are also less expensive. And by public, I mean national parks, state parks, city, county. And another one that we really enjoy is run by the Army Corps of Engineer. And even though it has the word Army in it, it is not a military campground. Anyone can stay at it. But it is managed by the federal government and specifically by the Army Corps of Engineer. But all of these, since they're run by some form of government, are lower cost because they're subsidized by your tax dollar. And the other thing to know about these campgrounds is while some of them have full hookups, many of them do not. I would say in our experience, we've stayed at more that are partial hookup. than full hookup. And what I mean by that is full hookup means you have water, power, and sewer right at your site. Partial hookup means you don't have all of that. And it can be different combinations, but usually the first thing that you lose is sewer. Although, as opposed to boondocking or dry camping where you have to go find a dump station, many of the publicly owned campgrounds that don't have sewer do have a dump station on site. So that's not an additional cost that you'll have. And then finally, in your campground cost is your privately owned campgrounds. And these also can range. You could have your little mom and pops that are no frills, but they have full hookups. They usually might have like some type of laundry facility. But then your higher end ones, in addition to also having those, usually are in the primo locations, like this photo of one that you're right on the waterfront. They also have a lot of amenities like swimming pools and hot tubs, mini golf, all types of activities, planned activities, and some of them even have restaurants as well. So there can be a range in prices. So let's talk about those prices. Just to give you a couple ideas, in your publicly owned campgrounds, they usually range in the $20-ish a night. I say usually because there's always exceptions. There are publicly owned campgrounds, Florida state parks, that are in the Florida Keys, and those can be $48 a night. I think we paid at one. So those can be a little bit more just because of the location. And then your privately owned campgrounds, we've stayed at privately owned campgrounds that were mom and pop, no frills, just full hookups, and were $26 a night. And then we've stayed at some of the higher end that had all of the fancy stuff that have been over $100 a night. We even have a video on that if you search on our thing on what campgrounds might be worth spending more than $100 a night. The great thing about being an extended traveler is if you do want the glamping life and you want to stay at the higher end places, you can save money by using what I call a length of stay discount. And what that means is they want to book their sites. So it's a certain amount for the nightly rate. Like say it might be $100 for the nightly rate. Some of those places, if you stay for a week or 2 weeks, they have a discounted rate that's only comes out to like $75 a night. And then the gold is if you can stay for a month. We've stayed at campgrounds that normally their nightly rate is well over $100, but since we were on the monthly rate, $35 a night. So you can really save money as an extended RV traveler that way.
Next to campground costs, fuel costs could be your second highest or even your highest, depending on how much you want to travel. And our biggest tip for fuel costs is to slow down. Slowing down just 10 miles an hour in a diesel could show you as much as 27% in fuel efficiency. So that can be a huge savings right there. It also, just slowing down a little bit, saves on the wear and tear on your RV because things aren't bouncing around as much on these America's highways, which are in such great shape. So slowing down will not only save you on fuel, but will also save you in maintenance. And those are two things you can do without any additional cost to you or joining any membership program. Keep up with your preventive maintenance, oil changes, tires, all that kind of stuff. Keep your tires properly inflated. All this will help save in your fuel costs. And then when you get to a location, we like to ride our bikes or walk as much as possible, or even take public transportation. It's usually a lot cheaper than driving. And so that will save you on your fuel costs as well. And then when you're driving down the highways, there's lots of programs that you can use. Two that we use the Pilot RV Plus card, and that gets you savings at Pilot and Flying J's. It also gives you a PIN number, so you don't have to go inside. If you're at the diesel side, you can pay right at the pump. And then also a newer program that's very popular is by TSD Logistics. and you join, you get a card, and you realize the group savings for their fuel costs, just like as if you were an over-the-road trucker. And then we also use apps like Gas Buddy to find the cheapest price in our area. So we've seen a difference in a 5-mile radius by as much as 83 cents a gallon on diesel. So that is a huge savings when you have a big fuel tank that you need to fill up. So just take advantage of everything you can to save fuel, and you will appreciate it in the long run for sure. Maintenance can be one of the most expensive items. You know, there's a lot of preventive maintenance, and the more diligent you are about keeping up with it, the less it's going to cost you in the long run with any major repairs. So keep up to date with preventive maintenance. And we're going to have another video in this seminar series that's all about simple preventive maintenance things you can do that will keep your RV in good shape. So one of the best things you can do is get out all those books that came with your RV and read them. And they tell you all of the preventive maintenance stuff that you need to do to each of the components in your RV. If your RV didn't come with the books, just look at the make and model of your particular component you're interested in, and you can find that manual online usually, or you can call and they can send you a manual that you'll be able to use for that particular component. But learn to perform the basic preventive maintenance stuff, and that will go a long way. And you only really need a basic set of tools to do most of these. And if you're not sure on how to do it, even after looking at the manual, just go on YouTube and find a video, and I guarantee there's a video there on how to do maintenance. And then the more comfortable you get with that, you can move into some of the bigger repairs, and that will also save you a ton of money in maintenance. The next thing is electronics. And if you have one of these $1,000 smartphones in your pocket, like most of us do, a lot of them can act as hotspots and provide some data if you need it on your computer, or you can just use the phone itself and do a lot of basic internet stuff that you need to do: email, videos, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. If you need more internet, you may want to invest in a hotspot. We actually, working full-time from the road, we had 2 hotspots. And then if we were somewhere for a long period of time, let's say a couple of months, we would even see if we could get high-speed internet at our site and use that over our hotspots. So you can get prepaid hotspots, or you can get, usually all cell phone carriers have hotspots that you can pay a monthly fee to, and they'll provide you a certain amount of gigs of internet. So just do some research on that and find which plan is going to work right for you and how much internet you actually need. And be sure to get enough to keep up with our videos. That's all I would have to say about that. And then you may also need a signal booster. Many campgrounds have Wi-Fi, but it's not that great. And so a booster, a Wi-Fi booster or a cellular booster will help you when you're out in these areas that don't have a good internet signal. And lastly, I couldn't get by without watching some television. And so when we're staying at campgrounds that have cable, we certainly hook up to that. But if not, we have a prepaid pay-as-you-go, satellite plan through Dish. They have a plan for RVers where you kind of pay on the months that you're going to use it, and you don't pay on the months that you're not going to use it. So that's definitely an option for television. Or if you have enough data, you can certainly use Netflix, Hulu, or things like that.
So the last thing on any budget needs to be savings. Savings is critical because things are going to go wrong. That's just life. And you're out on the road, whether you're full-time or on an extended trip far from your home, you're going to want to have that little bit of buffer. We call our savings, or part of our savings at least, our emergency fund. And that's exactly why. I mean, we had 1 month where we had to have a major repair that wasn't covered by insurance or warranty. And so that money came in handy. We also had one time within a 2-week period where we had 2 flat tires and I broke a tooth. And so, you know, it just seems like when something's going to go wrong, they always go wrong at the same time. So make sure that you are including in your budget a hefty emergency fund or savings slush fund, whatever you want to call it, to allow yourself for that money in case you need it, so that you don't get stranded somewhere. And also so it doesn't derail your plan. You also don't want to have to turn around and go back home. Or we know people who were full-time RVers who had to stop where they were, go out and get jobs and be able to earn enough money to be able to make a major repair to their truck. I think the engine had to be replaced or something like that. So definitely keep that in your budget. And then when you spend it, because you will ultimately need it, make sure that you're allowing yourself enough income some way, whether it's from working on the road, whether it's from having a pension, where you can replenish the savings, because you're probably going to need it more than once. And finally, we just want to let you know that if you go to our website, chickerystravels.com/show, you will find links to all of these presentations, as well as specific articles that we have written. So earlier I talked about saving money on different ways to save money on campgrounds, and I gave you just a couple ideas. There are actually a bunch of ideas that we have on the website, and that's just one example. For everything we've talked about, we pretty much have an article that will help you in that. And additionally, we have links to our 2 books and to our course, Full-Time RV Finance. So thank you so much for joining us. And I hope this gave you a lot of food for thought and helps you get planning on your goal of extended RV travel. And until we see you on the road, safe travels.